The number one question I get from Rise of Kingdoms players is, Shappy, what's the best 5 March setup in the game? Today, I'm going to try my best to answer that. What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to another Rise of Kingdoms gameplay episode from your very own Shappy Gaming. And today we are going to be talking about the best 5 marches in Rise of Kingdoms. I've seen a lot of videos from other creators talking about the best 7 marches, the best 6 marches, the best commanders, the best commander pairs. But I wanted to understand, as of right now, recording this game in 2025, what the best meta marches are to deal the most damage and take the least damage. And I spent hours trying to figure out this answer for you guys. So hopefully this deserves a like or two, or if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. But we are going to run through exactly how I tested this. Now, you can see the marches that I'm running today in game. I've got Ragnar Scipio, Zhuge Liang with Herman, Nevsky Joan, Ho Chu Bing with Arthur, the whole setup. I thought this was the best march I could possibly have. But I wasn't certain. And a lot of people will say this is the best setup you could have. But I've heard a lot of other people say different things. Like maybe Philip should be in your 5 March setup. Or maybe you, instead of 2 infantry, you should be running 2 archers. Which for me was a little scary because I only have 1 archer equipment set. Now, before we get too far into it, the best 5 March setup may not be the 5 March setup you have, and that's okay. The meta is constantly changing, and I don't think that you should completely restructure your account just to try and have today's 5 March setup, because again, who knows, the next archer setup may completely change everything. The main infantry might as well. So things are changing all the time. Now, let's talk about how I tested this. So you guys may have seen a previous video where I went through Specco's simulator, and this thing is incredible. Let me just tell you, Specco has done an amazing job on the simulator, and I'm not going to gatekeep here. If you want to try it out, the link is in the description of this video. You can go test things out, and let me know in the comment section if your results differ from mine. Again, I spent hours doing this. I must have tested 40 different combos and 40 different arrangements, and this was what I came out with as my final results. Now, we do need to focus on what exactly we're testing here. We're not testing a setup for Ark of Osiris. It could work there. I'm not going to guarantee that it will. We're not testing a setup for swarming structures. There may be better marches for that. What we're looking at here is the best setup for field fighting, which if you're anything like me and you're a mid-spender, that's probably what you're most worried about. And we are only talking about 5 marches here. If you're running 6 or 7 marches, you may be looking at a different setup, and that's okay too. Now, we did a couple different kinds of tests here. We did a KVK tech test with all damage set to 40%, and we did normal testing like you would fight in Home Kingdom. And we had some slightly differing results with these. Now, the format of our testing was I set it to VIP level 18. Because I'm VIP level 17, I think a lot of people are probably between 17 and 16. That's probably where you're sitting. I also set the civilization to Arabia. And the reason for this is that cavalry seem to be the most damaging units that I've seen as part of every single one of these tests. And so Arabia is actually the most friendly civilization to cavalry just based on my findings here. If you want to use another civ, again, you're welcome to go test it out yourself. I just like Arabia because you do get the cavalry attack and you get the Mamluk special unit. Honestly, you could try with Byzantium if you wanted to. That gives you cavalry health instead of attack. I'm sure that would work just as well, if not better. So there's the preface. Now, what exactly did our setup look like here? Well, for our equipment, we only added these. We did the KVK set in auto equip mode, and that applies to every single one of the commanders that we have here. We used mostly the talent trees that were available out of the box. I did find that this Zhuge Liang one was by far the best, So you can see that right there. That is the best one that I found. But if you want to test it out with a different, again, you're welcome to. I did try different combos with different talent trees to see if it made a difference in my results. It did not, with the exception of the Zug one, which is why I'm calling it out here. Now, here's the setup for William Wallace. Here's the setup for Nevsky. Again, we pretty much standardized everything. And we are using the same amount of units every time. There's no deviation there. 200 troops. All of our buffs are here. And I did put the 5% skill city skin here because we are going to have Twilight Falls enabled on our account. Most people use that. I thought that was pretty fair to set up. As for our formations and inscriptions, we did not set up any inscriptions. We did enable formations, but we didn't set up inscriptions. And the reason for that is you probably don't have the best inscriptions that you can possibly have. I know I don't. I wanted to keep this realistic. You may have different results if you use certain inscriptions, but what I'm shooting for here is getting the ground truth as to what the best 5 marches are going to be. So all of that prelude is done. Let's dive into these results so you can see that I'm not crazy, but that I had some pretty crazy findings. So spreadsheets, I know. If you guys do want to see the spreadsheet, let me know. I'm probably going to add a link to it in my Discord, which again is linked in the description, just because that's going to be the easiest place for you to find it. When you do a test against the test dummy here, you can see damage dealt and you can see damage received. This is really important because this gives you an idea of how effective your march was. So if we go back to our spreadsheet here, these were our first setups when I was fighting against the test dummy. And I tested the marches I thought were going to do the best, right? Ragnar Scipio, Nevsky Joan, William Wallace and Luce, Zug Herman, and Ho Chi Minh Arthur. That's what I have right now. It did okay. In home kingdom testing, it did okay. What's interesting here is Infantry plus Cav actually ended up with the best ratio of any of the other marches that I tested. I tested Archers plus Cavs. I tested Infantry plus Cavs. I tested Archers plus Infantry. But this setup right here, Scipio Ragnar, Nevsky Joan, Luce Philip, Zug Herman, and Ho Chi Minh Arthur had the best trade ratio of any march that I used. But trade ratio is interesting because the idea behind the trade ratio is it tells you your damage dealt, right? And it's divided by your damage received. In theory, this represents how your trades will be in a real battle. Now, obviously, I'm fighting the test dummy. So if my archers get targeted first, maybe my damage output's going to do a little bit less. And that does come into play later on in the video. But for this sake, I was really just trying to get an understanding of per attack, how much damage am I taking back? Now, some people this matters. It matters because if you're a free-to-play or a low spender, you need those resources. You can't afford to have more severely wounded, right? But there's the flip side of this, where you only get so much time to fight in a KVK. And as a consequence of that, you also need to get as many kills as you possibly can, and maybe you don't trade quite as well, but you need those kills. The rest of my testing for cavalry plus infantry was all right. I found Nevsky Arthur and Ho Chi Minh Belly actually did really well. That was our second best ratio for cavalry plus infantry. But overall, the one that took the cake was Scipio Ragnar with Luce Philip in the setup. But what really blew me away was when we got to archers plus cavalry. Now, archers get a really bad rap. I've said archers aren't great in the field. War Daddy Chadsky said archers aren't good in the field. But archers deal a ton of damage. And yes, I know archers are the first to get swarmed in a murder ball, assuming you can actually see what you're targeting, let's be honest. But that is a downside of them. They're also the slowest unit. So the odds that they get to combat before your other marches die may also be a deciding factor. But again, we're looking at best 5 marches, both realistically and in terms of damage output. I tested a lot of pairs with these archers. You can see I tried Shajar, I tried Ash YSG. I tried Ash YSG and I mixed up my cavalry pairings. I tried Ash YSG and I messed up both my cavalry pairings. So there was a lot of meddling here trying to figure out what was going to be the best setup. I test Ash Phillip. People love Ash Phillip. It didn't do quite as good as I was hoping. But what is interesting here is while the ratios were not as good, because archers take a lot more damage than infantry do. That makes sense to me. But what was interesting was I dealt the most damage in the home kingdom testing with Scipio Luce, Nevsky Joan, Ash YSG, Zug Herman, and Ho Chu Bing Arthur. Which says, if you're looking for the best glass cannon setup you can have, this is it. Right there. And that's a pretty good setup. If you're an archer main, set this up. But the trade ratio here was not great. It was 41, which is okay. But when you look around at our other setups here, Ash Phillip did better with a trade ratio, didn't do as much damage. It was close. It was close there, but it wasn't quite as good. And that tells you that, again, if you want the best glass cannon setup, Ash YSG is going to be it. But there are trade-offs with that. Now, what was really interesting is this. Not a single setup of infantry plus archers with a single cavalry march, right? 2 infantry, 2 archers plus cavalry, performed at all close to any of the tests that we had for cavalry plus archers and infantry plus cavalry. Cavalry are, whether we like it or not, the current meta unit. You must have cavalry in your setup or you will not perform. That was a really interesting finding for me. If you guys want to test it out, you're welcome to. I thought that was pretty cool. So all of this says, hey, these are the marches I should probably be running. If I'm running 2 infantry and some calves, I need a Max Phillip, right? Wrong. Things got really interesting when we took it to the KVK tester and turned on the all damage. And I'm going to get to that now because I think that's more indicative of what we're going to see in an Ark scenario or in a real KVK scenario, which is honestly where we're fighting. We're not going to be fighting in Home Kingdom all that much. At least hopefully not, unless you're with Bad Piggy, but typically not. So let's actually go take a look at what happened with the KVK testing. So I ran a lot of tests for KVK testing. I ran a lot. And there were a bunch of marches that really didn't work. I have a whole list here of marches that didn't work. Different setups that just couldn't cut it. But what's interesting is when I got to the KVK setups, these were the ones that did particularly well. So let me show you exactly how these looked, and we can talk through them. So the first pair I tried was Scipio Ragnar, Nevsky Joan, Luce Phillip, Zug Herman, and Ho Arthur, right? That was our best pair to begin with. Why would that not be our best pair in KVK? Well, my suspicion is that it wasn't our best pair in KVK because of the all damage bonus that we're getting. Because if you look at Phillip is not dealing all damage. He's not dealing skill damage really at all. And so comparatively, Phillip in Home Kingdom is a lot more useful than Phillip in KVK, where I can instead have a really high damage commander that's going to be kicking butt with the specific unit type that it needs to. And that's really important when we look at these different commanders. Because again, what's best in Home Kingdom might not be the best everywhere else. And this was a big learning for me. So then I said, okay, well, what if we tried Scipio Ragnar, Nevsky Joan, Ash YSG, right? That was our glass cannon. Zug Herman and Ho Chu Bing with Arthur. It actually did better than our original performing march. And I tested it 3 times just to be sure that I wasn't crazy. And this was the result. Ash YSG did better. So maybe Phillip isn't meant to be in your 5 march setup at all. To be honest, I didn't think so coming into this. But I wasn't done. I said, okay, well, Ash Phillip has been viable. I've seen everyone telling me to use it. Scipio Ragnar, Nevsky Joan, Ash Phillip, Zug Herman, and Ho Chu Bing Arthur. How does that do? It did okay. It did slightly better than the Luce Phillip, but nothing of statistical significance. And that doesn't surprise me, because again, I think Phillip is great in Home Kingdom, but once you get to KVK, he becomes just a little bit less viable, especially if you're a low to mid spender. And here's why. If you're a low to mid spender and you have infantry units, let's say you're running William Wallace with Luce, you can invest very highly in that infantry tech, and that's going to be a big deal. But Phillip, whether we like it or not, is going to be a leadership commander. And that is part of his disadvantage. It's that and the fact that he doesn't deal any skill damage. And so the multiplying factor that you get from the infantry attack bonus in KVK and the all damage bonus is actually making it so your Phillip is less valuable. Phillip's a great commander. I think you should have him in any 5 to 7 March setup. But maybe not your 5 March setup, right? If you have 6 Marches, sure. If you have 7 Marches, sure. He's a great commander, but maybe not for 5 Marches. But that's not all. I tested a couple other combos. I said, what about Scipio Luce? Scipio Luce is great. It tested really well in a lot of our other tests up top. And it did okay. It did about as good as the Phillip Marches, right? Luce and Ash. Scipio Luce, Nevsky Joan, Ash Phillip, Zug Herman, and Ho Chu Bing with Arthur. It did okay. And last but not least, I tested Scipio Luce with Ash YSD, our glass cannon. How'd it do? It did okay. Now, the March that did the best, to my joy, in the KVK setup was Scipio Ragnar, Nevsky Joan, William Wallace Luce, Zug Herman, and Ho Chu Bing Arthur. Now, if we come full circle and we go back to the game, you will see that my 5 March setup as it stands today is none other than Ho Chu Bing Arthur, William Wallace Luce, Ragnar Scipio, Zug Liang Herman, and Nevsky Joan. Now, what's interesting is I was wrong. Scipio is actually a better primary than Ragnar for this March, and the testing results all showed that. So I'm going to be swapping that around. But I was pumped to find out that my setup is actually the best setup if we're talking about KVK. And for all those that are running 2 infantry and 2 archers, I'm sorry. Remember what I said at the beginning of the video. Things may change with the next commander release. If you guys have enjoyed, please be sure to drop a like on this video and hit that subscribe button right over there, bottom right hand corner, and hit that bell so you get notified when new episodes come out. This episode took me easily hours to make between all the testing and the comparing and the retesting and all of it. Again, if you have any questions, let me know in the comment section below. My goal is to be there to help you all. Thank you all. Shappy out.